Grayling, of course, were always intriguing because they were the native fish, native salmonid to this region, and they had gone extinct.
Arctic grayling to me is just an easy thing for everyone to love because it's such a beautiful fish.
They're long and slender, have a sleek shape, and their coloration is sort of unique. They're silvery, but they're iridescent, almost have a purple cast to them.
They have this huge dorsal fin that has really beautiful colorations. It's highly variable.
They're just different. The fact that they were native to this region is really the thing that makes them special.
How does a fish go from being perhaps the most abundant in Michigan waters to gone? This is the story of Michigan's Arctic grayling, and more importantly, it's the story of how to bring them back.
One of the main backbones of Michigan's fishing industry started with the grayling. There were prospectors that were coming up and looking for logging areas in the state of Michigan, and they found this whitefish, it was dubbed. They didn't really realize it was a grayling at that point, and it was a huge draw. So there used to be the fishing line, railroad line, and it was bringing people specifically to come and fish for grayling.
When people went stream fishing for trout species in the northern lower peninsula, it was grayling. That's what they were after, and that's what they would catch. They were the cold water species, the salmonid in the northern lower peninsula. It was what fishing in Michigan was in the 1800s.
Arctic grayling are native to Michigan and only one other state in the lower 48. And they were extirpated, which means they're no longer here, but as a species, they're not gone from the earth.
To actually have lost a species in the state is just, in my mind, just a huge black eye. That's something that's much harder to bring it back than it would have been if we had been working earlier, everyone, before we realized that it was lost.
Michigan has historically had a very strong conservation ethic. Unfortunately, that conservation ethic has kind of been diluted, and I feel like, especially with the involvement of the tribes, it's pulling us back to that traditional knowledge that the tribes can provide because they were here before us.
Native species is a notion, an idea, and a philosophy that's just grounded in tribal resource management and conservation.
From the tribal members that I've spoken to and them talking to myself and other coworkers about their grandfathers, their grandmothers catching these fish, then learning about the decimation of this fish, that's something that is always in the back of my mind when moving forward with this project.
Their restoration to this area, to their native range, gives us a link back to that time before Michigan was changed to the point where they couldn't live here any longer.
The grayling's disappearance can be traced to a number of different factors, all of which were caused by humans.
There really was no big indicator other than the catch was dwindling. Numbers were going down significantly. Certainly there were changes in habitat that people probably noticed as well, but the big thing that they noticed was that grayling just weren't there anymore.
There used to be no fishing regulations in the state of Michigan, so there was a lot of overfishing in the 1800s.
We were literally taking these fish and piling them up on banks 6 feet tall. You know, we look at overfishing now as like taking a couple dozen too many, but I mean, they were literally taking them out. You know, you could have 6 hooks on a line and catch 6 fish at the same time.
There wasn't a saw timber carrying tree left standing between Lake Michigan and Lake Huron.
We used to slide the timber, they harvested those logs down into the streams to move them down to process them at the lumber mills, and that put a lot of sediment into our streams.
The rivers were used as sluiceways to transport these just unbelievable amounts of timber downstream. It basically scoured those river valleys into nothing but channels.
Once the grayling started to decline because of this kind of habitat destruction from the logging and pushing logs down the river, and then this overfishing side, we introduced non-native fish.
Brown trout are actually from Scotland and Germany, and they came here in the late 1800s. So if you think about coevolution, brook trout and grayling, they've evolved together here. So it does make sense that they would be able to coexist well together in the streams, where brown trout weren't introduced until the late 1800s.
Brown trout is like the staple of a sport fishery in this state that brings in a lot of money and resources anglers loved and have loved to them. And part of it is because they get big, right? We can get a trophy. So this balance of expectations of the public on what the grayling fishery is going to look like, and if that's going to conflict with a very important non-native brown trout fishery, it can get pretty divisive.
We kind of got to figure out where these fish will play and where streams can be managed for grayling without precluding brown trout from areas as well.
Many attempts to reintroduce grayling have failed, but the desire to reintroduce the fish remains. There's a strong indication this effort, with its emphasis on teamwork, will be different.
The Michigan Arctic Grayling Initiative is truly a collaborative effort among a very diverse group of people that really want to see Arctic grayling, a native species, return to Michigan.
This is statewide, broad level of support and interest, and because of that, we're now able to capitalize on that, and that builds momentum.
I like to joke with people and tell them that the last time that we tried this in Michigan, the Apple II computer was the thing, and I have more computing power in my pocket than what it took to land a few people on the moon. So like, I think we've come a long way in terms of technology and an understanding of these basic fish principles on top of the research that we've learned in the last 20, 30 years.
It's a different process than what happened before when grayling were just willy-nilly scattered, stocked all over the place without regard to water quality.
They started doing a research, a feasibility study to see, is it possible to bring this native species back? There was headway made, and the research that they did with Michigan Tech showed that some of these systems can support this fish. From there, it really grew quickly.
What we're really focusing on is trying to figure out what suitable fish communities grayling can survive in, but not only survive, but also thrives. I look at competition between age 0 brook, brown, and grayling. I look at predation rates between age 1 brook and brown trout on grayling fry. And I also look at imprinting at early life history stages, so really young, just after hatching.
We've learned some things from what's been successful in Montana, and we think that we were missing a critical imprinting period early on in the fish's development. And imprinting is that time where the fish learn for lack of a better term, the smell of the water that they were hatched. And we think that by stocking fish or rearing fish in a hatchery up to yearling size, so they're already 12 to 14 months old by the time we stock them in their receiving waters, that we were missing that key period. So once we stock them, they kind of wander looking for home, and because they were raised in a hatchery, they never imprinted on that water where they were stocked.
You got to bring them up from an egg in where they're going to be, so they have this deep evolutionary capacity that they require, to be born and raised in the place that they're going to live and survive.
A remote site incubator is a device that allows grayling to develop in the water it will live in by exposing the eggs to stream water in an environment safe for them to grow. It appears the RSIs are the missing piece for a successful reintroduction.
We're really hopeful that by putting them into the streams as eyed eggs that are just about ready to hatch, that they're going to be exposed to that water. They'll learn that chemical fingerprint, that smell, if you will, of the water, and they'll know how to home right back to that, not just that stream, but that exact gravel bed where they were hatched. And in this instance, they're not emerging from a gravel bed, they'll be emerging from the remote site incubators. We're hopeful that this is going to be effective.
It might not be able to work everywhere, but in select streams, I definitely think it will. But if it didn't, I have already learned so much by studying this grayling in early life history, and that contribution to the scientific community is really fulfilling to me.
Anytime you lose a native species, you've got a less diverse ecosystem, and it's not as strong or vibrant.
Kind of feels like the stars are lined up this time so that we're going to be successful, and that's a cool thing to be part of.
They're a touchstone to our conservation past, our ecological past. And if we have to make room for grayling and not have so many brown trout and rainbow trout, I feel like that's a great trade-off and a necessary trade-off.